What the hell just happened? Unless you've been living under a rock, of course, you're now well aware that Luka Doncic is a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. Yes. Still an absolutely absurd sentence to say. And now Anthony Davis is, of course, a member of the Dallas Mavericks. On top of that, the other pieces involved were Maxi Kleber and Markieff Morris going to the Lakers, and Max Christie and the only one of those Lakers first-round picks, the 2029 one, going to the Mavericks. The Jazz got involved in this as they always seem to be the beneficiary third team who gets to take on some extra picks and potential young players just to make money work, as they got Jalen Hood-Schifino, the 2025 Clippers second, and a 2025 Mavericks second. But of course, that's not going to be the focus here. The focus is going to be the fact that Luka Doncic is somehow a Laker and that Anthony Davis is with the Dallas Mavericks. Now, we will slightly discuss the absurdity of this move happening and that Luka Doncic was traded in his prime to the Lakers, but we are going to primarily focus on the actual basketball implications here, what this means for the Mavericks in the short term, and what their end goal could end up being as to why they could potentially rationalize trading away Luka Doncic. And we will also discuss what the Lakers need to do now that Anthony Davis is no longer on the roster. Now let's start with the Dallas Mavericks and the true elephant in the room. That is the fact that they traded Luka in his prime and not for any indication of planning for the future. For Anthony Davis, who's in his 30s, and a singular first-round pick that is now going to be on a team that Luka is likely to be on in 2029. Now, there's been plenty of rumors and conspiracies going on as to why this is. The most common report, of course, being that the Mavericks had concern with Luka's health and potential conditioning, which sure has been an issue in the past, but not to the extent where you're trading him away in his prime for Anthony Davis and a first-round pick. Point being, whether there's something suspicious going on, whether there's other information that we are not privy to or that we have not been disclosed of yet, or that simply the front office is making a very puzzling decision that could end up getting someone fired, Luka Doncic is no longer with the Dallas Mavericks. Now, disregarding that absurdity, what does that mean for them going forward through to the end of this season and beyond into the offseason? Well, the first point of note is Anthony Davis is now on the team. And although this is an absurd trade to get rid of Luka, they did still get a borderline top 10 player back in the league. He's just significantly older and has his own injury concerns. Now, on that note, to AD's credit, he has been much more available over the last couple of seasons and has been playing the vast majority of games for the Lakers, and that's something that the Mavericks will be hoping holds true. Otherwise, you have AD and his past injury concerns, Kyrie and his past availability concerns, and his current health injuries as it is, alongside the fact that Klay Thompson is one of your other core guys that isn't exactly young and has dealt with his own severe injuries. But on the surface, the AD fit looks very good, and I think sets the Mavericks up to be one of, if not the best defensive interior team in the league. This was already a team that was led by Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively in the interior, and made them a top half defensive team and nearly a top 10 defensive team by defensive rating in the league. Now, of course, Derek Lively is going to be out for about the next 2 months, but should hopefully be back for the postseason, which is ultimately the end goal for the Mavericks here. Daniel Gafford, for the time being, is still there, and of course, now you're adding Anthony Davis, plus the implication of the wing defense / some amount of help side rim protection from a guy like PJ Washington. Ultimately, that combination, plus the roles of Quentin Grimes and Najee Marshall, you can have a unit that is going to likely lead a top 5 defensive team in the league, even with the lapses defensively at times from a guy like Kyrie or from a guy like Klay, who is nowhere near the defender he once was. It's a weird statement to say given they just traded one of the best players in the league, but this is almost become a win-now move for Dallas. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a good win-now move, but it's where they've positioned themselves as a franchise. 2 reasons for this. The first reason being is I genuinely think they're going to be just as good, if not better, in a postseason setting with the current roster than they were pre-trade. The reason I say that is that defensive unit is going to be so elite and is going to be so successful in a postseason setting. It is going to be very difficult for teams to deal with Anthony Davis, Dereck Lively, and Gafford. I mean, you just can't deal with that. That is an absurdly difficult trio to score against. Not to mention some of the perimeter defenders they have and the good defensive coaching of Jason Kidd. As far as offense goes, obviously you're losing a lot without Luka, but this allows them to open up their offense a little bit more, not rely as much on Luka, and maybe have a little bit more movement and orientation within the rest of the team. This still is a team that is going to have Kyrie Irving, who can go and get his own and be a great playoff performer. And they're still going to have Anthony Davis, of course, who is going to give you 22, 24 plus a night. Has had his playoff performances be of concern as of late, but we also know this is a guy who played some of his best basketball ever in the bubble and got the Lakers a title. Point being, this roster is still very well composed to make a playoff run, and I think should be amongst the teams you're considering contenders in the Western Conference, even without Luka. Now, where they become win now with this trade is not to do with AD. AD is still under contract for a while, and although he is much older than Luka, I still expect him to be quite productive for several more seasons. The concern is that you now gave up Luka, and your one perimeter scorer who is going to lead your offense in Kyrie has a player option at the end of the season. Now he could accept that player option, he could opt out of it and resign, in which case Kyrie and AD remains your core for the next few seasons. But there is a world where Kyrie could opt out, and it could be a sign and trade, or he could walk directly in free agency, leaving the Mavericks with AD, Klay Thompson, and the rest of their role players and young pieces. Not a terrible team, because the defense would still be very good, but offensively it would get a bit janky and a bit ugly at times, to say the least. Outside of Kyrie, there aren't many guys that are worried about losing in the short term. Anthony Davis would not have a player option until the 2027-28 season, and the 2026-27 season is when PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford would be able to hit free agency. So the next couple of years, they're okay, outside of Kyrie Irving, obviously the most important piece now in this team on the offensive end. I think long-term, there's real concerns, and obviously this move significantly hurts their future, considering they only got one first back, so they don't exactly have a ton of assets to go make some separate trade with, nor are they going to be bringing in an absurd amount of young players. And of course, the fact that, you traded away one of the best few players in the league who's just entering his prime. But in the short term, I think they will remain competitive throughout the rest of the season. It's just, it's baffling, to say the least. Well, let's move to the Lakers. Obviously, the A-plus winners of this trade on the surface. Obviously, if there's anything else that comes out about Luka, things will change. But on the surface, this is a clear win for the Lakers, whose biggest question around them was, what is their future? What do they do post-LeBron AD era? They don't have many picks. Their young assets don't look great, and their only really good younger player right now, outside of Dalton Knecht, who they just drafted, is Austin Reeves. And he's 26 now. Not exactly a spring chicken anymore. The Lakers now went to one of the teams that people generally regarded as having one of the worst futures in the league, to instantly having one of the best, simply because they are the ones paying Luka Doncic. Now, obviously, this immediately makes the Lakers' offense much better than it's been. There's still some three-point shooting concerns from some of their role players and secondary guys, but the acquisition of Dorian Finney-Smith, and now, of course, Luka Doncic even more so, makes this team significantly better from three and significantly opens up their offense and alleviates a lot of creation off of LeBron. The big question, what the hell are they going to do on defense? Obviously, AD leaves a gaping hole at the center position, given his absence on the roster, and that leaves you with the likes of Christian Wood, who doesn't really play anymore, Jared Vanderbilt, who is just now working his way back into the lineup over the last week or so, and Christian Koloko, and obviously Jackson Hayes. It's not pretty. None of these guys are obviously individuals you want leading the back end of your defense, giving you primary rim protection, or starting for you in any capacity on a team that has legitimate championship aspirations because they have LeBron, and now even more so because they have Luka. They're the 21st ranked defense per defensive rating so far in the league this year, and that has been with AD. Without him, they would be bottom 5 without a doubt. So this is an issue that does need to get addressed immediately, and if they don't address it before the trade deadline, they can kiss any chance of winning anything significant this year goodbye, because their defense is simply going to be too abysmal to win in the playoffs. The offense, it would be good, but even then it wouldn't be elite with some of the three-point shooting they'd be lacking from their role players, and nowhere near elite enough to make up for this level of defense. All of this meaning the Lakers keeping that 2031 first-round pick and only having to use one in the Luka Doncic trade becomes crucial, because they now still have the leverage to go out and get their starting center for, at the very least, the rest of the season. A deal with the Atlanta Hawks for Clint Capella is certainly an option. There's been rumors and pushes by myself for the Hawks to trade Capella for years now, with the presence of Onyeka Okongwu on the roster and, of course, being their backup still. Capella is entering the last year of his deal, so he would be an expiring for the Lakers, but it would make sense for the Hawks to move off of him, and would certainly be an improvement for the Lakers in terms of some rim protection. Not amazing, given his certain lack of size for a starting big. He's about 6'9", 6'10", but he would certainly improve their rim protection, he would certainly improve their rebounding, and he would be a very good lob threat, as he has a ton of experience with that with Trae Young, and would be able to fit in perfectly with his draft night trade member in Luka Doncic. Now, Jakob Poeltl of the Toronto Raptors is another option that the Lakers could consider. The Raptors are in a bit of an interesting scenario, given they've started to have great success over the last few weeks, despite them ideally wanting to tank for a better draft pick this year. Jakob Poeltl still has a few years left of his deal, so could be a longer-term option for the Lakers, and ultimately wouldn't be a lob threat or a guy that's out shooting threes for the Lakers, and free throw shooting late in games, especially in the postseason, could become an issue. But his push shot is very good, he's a solid rebounder, and a very good interior defender. There's a lot of upside here for Poeltl in giving the Lakers what they would need: defense and rebounding. Now, another option for them, which is probably the optimal option if they are able to convince the Trailblazers to do so, is getting Robert Williams from Portland. Obviously dealt with his fair share of injury concerns throughout his NBA career, hence why he has been in Portland and why Boston traded him in the first place for many reasons, is that his value was simply impacted by the fact that he was as injury prone as he is. Now he's getting his way back onto the court now over the last few weeks, still showing that he is very explosive, very mobile, and a very good switchable five-man who has very good rim protection, an underrated offensive game, who can be a very good lob threat, underrated passing ability in the high post. He would be a perfect fit for the Lakers, and probably the easiest guy to match salaries with as well. That, in my opinion, should be the primary target for the Lakers if they are looking for their five-man for this playoff run. Other options they could consider, but I don't think are optimal, that have been discussed in the past or since this trade. Jonas Valanciunas, of course, is well reported on. Of course, he's the type of guy that the Wizards will likely be looking to trade at some point. He's there to give some amount of protection and tutelage to Alex Sarr right now, but ultimately he's obviously not a long-term piece for them. The issue with JV is, as everyone kind of knows at this point, is he's an okay, but not great three-point shooter, and he's pretty horrific on defense other than as a true post-interior defender. He's not a good rim protector, he's not overly mobile, he's not switchable. He's ultimately just not what the Lakers need and is not going to help their defense. Nikola Vucevic is similar in that light. He's obviously someone that the Bulls have discussed potentially trading and has been having one of the best years of his career, and certainly his best year in Chicago this season. But similarly, the defense isn't going to be great. It's better than JV, and Vucevic has improved on that end of the floor since being in Chicago, but he's not some great rim protector by any means, and he's still not an overly switchable big with great foot speed. Now, offensively, you'd get some very good playmaking potential from your five-man and very good three-point shooting upside, but I don't think that's what the Lakers need to prioritize here. They need someone who can keep this defense at least somewhat stable, given the fact it wasn't a great defense, even with AD, one of the best defensive players in the league, on the roster. Another option that could be considered that is a bit more defensively stable is Nicholas Claxton of the Brooklyn Nets, a team who, of course, the Lakers already acquired Dorian Finney-Smith from, and are certainly looking to offload some of their more productive players to avoid getting a higher pick than they otherwise would like. The issue with Nicholas Claxton is he just got re-signed on a long-term deal that is worth around $27 million a year, and that would become very difficult for the Lakers to match contracts on. It is doable, but they'd have to trade a lot of the fringes of their roster to do it. It's unlikely that's going to be a package that Brooklyn would want. They'd have to cut some of their own players on the end of their roster, or just cut guys that were already getting in the trade from the Lakers. So Claxton, although a very good fit, would give them very good defensive presence on this team. Likely not an option the Lakers are going to be able to pursue. Ultimately, this is a very, very odd move that I don't think we've fully seen all of the details from. But the fact that everyone was blindsided, us, and especially the likes of AD and Luka, is absurd. Mismanagement by some front offices, to say the least, especially the front office of the Mavericks. And it's going to be very interesting to see the implications of this, even just through the rest of the week, as we see what the Lakers do before the trade deadline, as there is certainly another move to come.